With the 21st pick in the 2014 NFL Draft, the Green Bay Packers select Clinton Dix.
It's time for the Packers War Room Podcast.
Made me a believer into really thinking that the Packers really could run the table, and that was when I said right away, they're winning the NFC North.
The bomb to Jordy Nelson was just a moment that I'll never forget. For him to be able to get behind the corner and really just catch the prayer, essentially, was just quintessential Packers 2016.
Like I said, for this team to win 2 playoff games was just astounding with how beat up they were and the state of their defense, really.
And now, alongside Jacob Westendorf and Cody Bauer, here's your host of the Packers War Room Podcast, Ross Uglem.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Packers War Room Podcast. I am your host, Ross Uglem, and joining me is Jacob Westendorf and Cody Bauer. Guys, how's it going?
Going well. Excited to be here. It's a redux of something we did last year, a little bit more permanent this time of year, so excited to be back. Cody, welcome back, and excited to be doing this with you again this year as well.
Yeah, really excited. I'm glad we decided to take this full-time off-season podcast. You have to forgive me for my voice today. A little under the weather, but we're going to power through it.
Yeah, I appreciate both you guys taking the time to do this. We should have a 1 show per week schedule. Generally midweek we're thinking. Probably a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday record, something in there. We'll get it to you by the weekend every chance that we get. And what we're going to do is we're just going to talk about the offseason each week with a special emphasis on the NFL draft. Jacob and I certainly, deem ourselves draftniks, and Cody would really be kind of the draft expert of this show. Jacob and I, you might remember, of course, from the benches. Jacob is currently part of Pulse of the Pack with Jason Perone, and I've been on hiatus podcast-wise. So that's what the general idea of this show is going to be, is an emphasis on this offseason, and we'll go right up to the eve of the 2017 NFL Draft. It's wild that we're already to 2017 and that we've already covered 3 of these, Jacob.
Yeah, it is, and it's amazing to me to think. It seems like, just yesterday we were joking about Aaron Rodgers coming back from a broken collarbone, which kind of spawned from the benches, and just talking about Clinton Dix or some of the other first-round picks or other picks that have come in, or best pick ever, worst pick ever, some of the stuff that we got from the benches. But it's been a fun ride. So this is something, I think we did this last year, and this year wanted to make it, like we said, a little bit more weekly, and instead of 3 nights leading up to. So this is exciting to kind of get you back going, because as you said, from the benches is unfortunately no more, and you've been on hiatus. So kind of get you back in the swing of things here, and then bring Cody along with us, as the draft is a 365-day a year thing, and not just a just 1 or 2 day thing like it used to be with Mel Kiper and the hair and all that kind of stuff. So instead of just doing it 1 or 2 days, getting it a full off season and getting ready to talk 2017, and the Packers maybe hopefully getting those 1 or 2 or 3 pieces to finally get them back into another Super Bowl.
Absolutely. So we're going to start the show with a quick recap of the season, or our thoughts on the fun ride that was 2016. And we're just going to hit on a couple of topics. First of all, let's talk about our favorite regular season game. And for me, it was Christmas Eve. Just growing up where I did, I think, my specific dislike for the Minnesota Vikings is well chronicled. But at the same time, I really felt like that game was as close to 2014 as anything we saw all season. They were pretty much scoring the ball at will, moving the ball vertically down the field against a very good defense, at least the remnants of a very good defense. The Vikings kind of tailed off there towards the end defensively. But, Rodgers to Nelson really looked like something that, was from Christmas past, and I just enjoyed the butt kicking that was that game. I really got a kick out of the whole thing. I mean, that was such a sweet way to really end Minnesota's season. a season in which they traded a 1-4 to kind of go all in for a Super Bowl run, and to not even finish above 500 was really kind of pathetic. And that game right there really sealed the deal. So that was my favorite regular season game. Cody, how about you?
Mine would have to be the one against the Chicago Bears at the end of the year. Just part of the 8-game winning streak to put us in the playoffs and through the playoffs. The bomb to Jordy Nelson was just a moment that I'll never forget. For him to be able to get behind the corner and really just catch the prayer, essentially, just was a cementing moment again against a division rival like that. Granted, they're not a very good team, but with a couple missed opportunities early in that game to make that game really a no contest, to have it come down to the wire like that and have that a bomb from Rodgers to Nelson was just quintessential Packers 2016. That game will I'll just stick with me for a while.
Jacob?
Pretty simple. In the last few years, the Packers have kind of built a couple new quote-unquote rivals, and the newest one is the Seattle Seahawks. And, at 4-6, Aaron Rodgers mentioned that he felt the team could run the table, and they beat, the Philadelphia Eagles, who were an okay team but kind of floundering by the point that they got them. The Houston Texans at home. Beating the Seattle Seahawks 38-10 was really the point where run the table became a reality to me, and probably a lot of others, I think, as well. The Seahawks were a team that had been a thorn in their side. I know the Packers have beaten them in years past, but everybody, the first thing you think of when you hear Seattle Seahawks on the schedule is 2014 NFC Championship game. Not to bring up bad memories again, but they came in, the Packers went right down the field. Devontae Adams catches a big touchdown to start the game. They pick off Russell Wilson 4 or 5 times. I can't even remember. There were so many of them. Everything seemed to break their way that day, and that was the game. Cody was talking about how it kind of sprung the Packers into the playoffs. That was the game that, to me, made me a believer into really thinking that the Packers really could run the table, and that was when I said right away, they're winning the NFC North, and they're going to the playoffs, and then eventually rode them all the way into the NFC Championship game before, unfortunately, they weren't able to finish that job. But Seattle Seahawks beating them 38-10, always a fun way. There's never going to be enough ways to make up for the pain that happened in 2015, but beating them by 28 points and watching them kind of behave the way that they did, always going to be fun for me.
Yeah, the From the Benches group text is not dead. It's certainly not as active as when we were recording every week, but I remember, I think after maybe the Philadelphia win that kind of saved the season, you said, yeah, well, we're still going to get our butts kicked by the Seahawks. So I understand why that game gave you, realistic hope for the end of the season and really kind of affirmed my belief that this team was a lot better than 4-6. And to end 10-6, with 2 playoff victories after that, that was really a special ride. And I hope people, as time goes on, can appreciate what went on this season, even though it didn't end in a Lombardi Trophy. Cody, why don't you talk to us about your breakout player from this season?
My breakout player would be Ty Montgomery. I think that's a pretty on-the-nose pick. Here's a guy, obviously who suffered through the injury the year before, was slot wide receiver, kind of stuck behind Cobb on the depth chart. Didn't really know what to expect of him, but had high hopes from the flashes he had shown earlier in the year before. For him to step up and essentially become the lead running back one for this team, it was clear that his performances again against the Bears, one of my favorite regular season games, and the flashes he had shown throughout the second half of the season as he took over the reins as the number 1 running back, where it's been clear that if he goes into next year as our running back 1, I think that most people would be comfortable with that. His ability to catch passes out of the backfield, his patience at the line of scrimmage, his explosion through the hole. I think he has a lot of the qualities you want in a running back. With the number change next year, I think a lot of fans will get excited and pair him up with either bringing Lacey back on a 1 year or maybe drafting a guy. I think there'll be a lot of excitement for having Montgomery in the backfield, and that's why he's my breakout player for this year.
Yeah, for sure. Pro Football Focus, people have differing opinions of that site. They really do have some fantastic pre-draft content. And one of their main guys, Sam Palazzolo, really loved Montgomery as a running back coming into that draft and wrote a lot about why he felt like eventually Montgomery was going to be a running back at the next level. So I can understand why people are so excited, but at the same time, how this whole thing happened. His patience, he really is natural as a back. And his body type, they used to use Randall Cobb in that position as well, but he just is built like a slot receiver, where Montgomery is not. He really is built like somebody who can run the ball. You see, Kamara, McCaffrey mocked to the Packers in the first 2 rounds. It's like, no thanks. I have no problem with getting Eddie Lacy on the cheap. And Eddie Lacy, Ty Montgomery, John Crockett, three-headed monster is probably going to cost you less than $10 million in total. Probably less than 8. And for me, that's just a really good market efficiency and something that I'd like to see going forward. Jake, who's your breakout player from this season?
I spent all offseason banging a drum, myself and Zach Cruz, team Davante Adams. And I know, the joke will be he still dropped probably 4 or 5 touchdowns, maybe more. But Davante Adams was good when he was healthy in his rookie season. He wasn't healthy in his sophomore season. He was one of the worst wide receivers in all of football. He finished second in the league in touchdown receptions, and he was very good, much more good than he was bad most of this season. Had a very good game in the playoffs against the New York Giants. Him and Randall Cobb combined for I believe it's the second most playoff yardage in playoff history for the Green Bay Packers, second to Jermichael Finley and Greg Jennings in that 2009 shootout against the Arizona Cardinals. So Davante Adams, good year all year. One of the best throws Aaron Rodgers made all season was that game against Philadelphia where he drops one in the bucket. Davante Adams makes a great catch. Just some of the plays, he was good after the catch, made plays at the line of scrimmage. He's probably not ever going to be the star that he was touted up to be going into the 2015 season, but he's not the scrub that needs to be replaced by Jared Abbrederis or Jeff Janis that everybody was clamoring for going into this season either. So my guy is Davante Adams, the wide receiver out of Fresno State.
I don't know how many more 2,000-word articles I need to write on Cheesehead TV claiming that Davante Adams is going to be okay to get a spot on Team Davante with you and Zach, but I digress. Adams was very good all season. I definitely agree with that. My guy's on the defensive side of the ball. I really fell in love with Jake Ryan as the season moved on. He was legitimately dominant against the New York Giants. You can go back and look at some of the cut-ups and stuff. I think that was his best game of the season. I think it was a lot to ask of him to play that well against Ezekiel Elliott and the Cowboys. But I really think he is what they were looking for in the middle. I think he's a better player than A.J. Hawk, and he was taken a lot of picks after A.J. Hawk was taken. I think that he is that star in the middle, and if they're going to move as he becomes yet another year removed from that ACL injury at Michigan, I think you're really going to see his athleticism shine next season. If you want to play Martinez, you want to play Matthews, you want to play Joe Thomas next to him, I think he's that rock, and that's something that you can look forward to on defense. I really believe he's an above-average starter, and that's one of the places I don't think they need to replace on defense is his starting position as you look personnel-wise at the obvious side of the ball that needs to be addressed. Jake Ryan is probably not that guy. And then we've all decided, we talked in the pre-production meeting, Jacob, I'm just going to give you 45 seconds to wax poetic about the Dallas game.
I hate the Dallas Cowboys. I think anybody that grew up relatively close to the 90s knows that the Packers don't like the Cowboys. There's so much about that game that we'll talk about forever. The catch by Jared Cook, the throw by Aaron Rodgers, the 2 bombs by Mason Crosby. I'll never forget my reaction after Mason Crosby made the second field goal. I believe I said before the kick that my firstborn son would be named Mason if he made the kick. So there you go. My firstborn son will now be named Mason. And I jumped onto the couch and hugged one of my friends and thought very much that the Packers were destined to go to the Super Bowl after that. But epic game against a team that I don't like very much, and in a building that the Packers traditionally hadn't had a lot of success, and now that new building is open and had a ton of success. The 3 biggest wins in AT&T Stadium have been by the Green Bay Packers, and that's a great feeling for me as someone who really doesn't like the Cowboys.
Cody?
Yeah, my reaction was very much like Jacob's. Jumping on the couch, hugging my friends, that playoff game against Dallas was just an epic performance for them, and it's a game I won't ever forget. That's for sure.
I share the same opinions as Jacob. I'm a little bit older than he is, so I can kind of remember the Jason Garrett Thanksgiving game. I can remember the loss in the 1994 NFC Championship, or the 1995 NFC Championship game, excuse me. I remember not liking Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, and Michael Irvin, and I also didn't like the very good Dallas team in the mid-2000s, the one that was the number 1 seed in 2007. So, my dislike of the Dallas Cowboys runs almost as deep as any dislike I have for a team in the NFC North. Their fans are annoying. They are championed, of course, by a Fox Sports 1 mouthpiece that we won't name. But this was just like you guys both said, and it's a word that gets overused, but it was epic. It was an epic game. To end like that, it was just incredible. Something I'll never forget. Like I said, for this team to win 2 playoff games was just astounding with how beat up they were and the state of their defense. Really, by the end of the season, I have to say that was incredible. Let's dive in, boys. Let's get into the draft. Okay, we're going to throw out offensive tackle because they have probably the top tackle tandem in the league, and they have a second-round pick that really, I would say, acquitted himself well this season in Jason Spriggs. So they have 3 starting quality offensive tackles. We're going to leave that alone. They've got their QB, their backup QB that's very talented, they're comfortable with, and the best quarterback in football, Aaron Rodgers. So we're going to throw that out too, and we're not worried about punters and kickers. Those 4 positions being removed, Cody, rank Green Bay's offseason needs.
Well, of course, as I'll probably mention, free agency, of course, will dictate a lot of what this could be. But I think right off the top of the head, you have to throw cornerback out there. With Ladarius Gunter, an undrafted free agent, being essentially your number 1 corner, that's not exactly a good thing. Demarius Randall regressed this year. Quentin Rollins regressed this year. And then you have just a bunch of Jags out there, just another guy. So I think, looking to get a number 1 potential lockdown guy would make the whole secondary that much better. I think your number 2 need, or potentially number 1B, if you would be edge rusher with all the free agents, to Peppers, Perry, Dayton, Elliott. Edge has to certainly be up there as well. Another position you're going to have to look at is running back. As I mentioned earlier, Montgomery, of course, will be back, but Lacey's a free agent. Christine Michael's a free agent. Starks should be cut with relatively 0 dead money. That's a position you'll have to look at. Tight end, the only tight end that's going to be under contract is going to be Richard Rodgers. Jared Cook was only signed to a 1-year deal, so depending on whether or not you bring him back, tight end will have to be addressed. Inside linebacker, Jake Ryan did have a good year. Joe Thomas actually flashed quite a bit for us. Blake Martinez was a decent rookie for Green Bay as well. So that position isn't exactly a huge need, but then again, if the right player falls in your lap, that could be a position that's addressed. And then, of course, building from the trenches, your interior offensive lineman, Lang is a free agent. J.C. Treader is a free agent. That position should be addressed relatively early, whether it be you addressing it for a starter or swing back up in any of the 3 inside spots. And then the defensive line, you're going to want to obviously continue to build from there and make your linebackers better, put pressure on the quarterback. Kenny Clark, last year's first-round pick, of course, had his moments this year and has showed signs of being a good football player, but you can never have too many good one of those. So just the top 3 off my head, I would go cornerback, edge, and then running back.
Jacob?
I think, you're going to hear this argument quite a bit, and some of it, like Cody said, is going to depend on free agency, and, Nick Perry, Dayton Jones. Julius Peppers, I think, is one of those guys, and we'll kind of talk about this with re-signing, but Julius Peppers is a guy who I think should have and has played his last down as a Green Bay Packer, but cornerback and edge rusher are, the 2 needs that, and I think they're interchangeable as your top overall need. With all due respect to Ladarius Gunter, he battled his butt off all season long. And, if you go through what he did in the playoffs, Odell Beckham, Des Bryant, and Julio Jones, that's an assignment that, guys like Richard Sherman or Darrelle Revis in his prime, or, you name your corners, they would struggle at times with those assignments. And, Ladarius Gunter is, I still think, a serviceable player, but he's not a guy that you should ask to be guarding those players in those kinds of games. So, cornerback or edge rusher, that's what those I think are interchangeable, because you're talking about Clay Matthews. Mike McCarthy said in his press conference today they need to move him around more, so I think you're going to see him playing inside and out. Matthews is a guy, too, who played 29 consecutive games when he was an inside linebacker. He was banged up a lot as soon as they moved him back to the edge full time. So you may look at him playing more inside than out next year to keep him healthy. Nick Perry might be a guy they pass on paying. I'm not sure if they'll do that or not. Dayton Jones, another free agent. You don't know on how that's going to go either. But edge rusher is something that they need. They didn't have a whole lot of pass rush down the stretch, and that's something. Today's league on defense is about hitting quarterbacks and covering receivers. Packers didn't do a whole lot of that in the playoffs regardless. So they need help in the secondary and rushing the passer. So that's your need. That's number one. Number two, whatever way you want to look at it, and I think you can interchange those two things. After that, I think you're looking at tight end or pass catcher, I think, is what I would rank after that. And by pass catcher, I'm looking at more outside receiver. And I say that because Jordy Nelson is transitioning to the Larry Fitzgerald type role of a slot type receiver. He'll still play some reps on the outside, but he's playing the majority of his reps in the slot. And he was an assassin from there. Randall Cobb obviously is going to do some things from the slot as well. But you're moving guys. You need another reliable outside receiver with the way the Packers run their offense. Devontae Adams is going to be that one guy on the other side, but you need another boundary threat. Now, whether that's organic growth from Trevor Davis or someone else, whether that's someone in the draft, a free agent, that remains to be seen. Tight end, Cody mentioned a guy, Jared Cook was a free agent. Richard Rodgers kind of is what he is, and I was looking, Mike McCarthy is a guy who loves his tight ends, and I was looking at some past games from this season, or even just past years, and you've had guys on this roster like Justin Perillo, and Matthew Mulligan had some time in camp this year, and just some really unathletic, uninspiring tight ends. I would love to see the Packers finally get that second athletic tight end that can move down the field. I've talked about this as an idea for the future of Jared Cook as your starting tight end, and then someone like O.J. Howard or Jordan Leggett for draft prospect namesake as a tandem, and go that route. And then your other need after that would be the interior of the offensive line. T.J. Lang, J.C. Treader, both free agents. I tend to lean more toward T.J. Lang as the guy to re-sign. I'll talk about why here in a little bit. But even if you can't bring that guy back, the Packers' strength of their team this year, outside of Aaron Rodgers, was their offensive line. The reason they could do a lot of things this year was because their front five was, outside of maybe the Dallas Cowboys, the best offensive line in all of football. That's something that you don't mess with, especially we've seen, the Packers, they did a lot of good things in some years with bad offensive lines, but we've seen how games can get ruined when a guy like Darren College is struggling or Marshall Newhouse is playing left tackle. The Packers have a really good offensive line this past season. That's not something they should mess with. And then the other side of the ball as well. Defense, you need to keep putting pressure on the quarterback from the interior. Again, organic growth from Kenny Clark, Dean Lowry, guys like that should help the middle of the defense. But you can never – Ted Thompson always drafts offensive and defensive linemen. I think he's drafted at least a defensive lineman in every draft or an offensive lineman in every draft and the other in all but one. So I think you can expect to see that again. But and then a running back as well. So basically all of Cody's needs, the only thing I would rank is I would interchange pass catchers with running backs simply because in the Packers offense, the passing game is more important than the running game. And I think you could find a running back Ross, you were talking about market inefficiencies and the way the Packers use Ty Montgomery. It's just a little bit easier to find a running back than it is a quality pass catcher.
I totally agree, and I'm just going to kind of talk to this topic really in generalities more than going through a full ranking like you guys did. I would say that I probably differ from you two in that I specifically have edge rusher, probably in front of corner. I think I personally probably have a little bit more hope for Devontae Adams, for Quentin Rollins and Demarius Randall to take that year 2 to year 3 Devontae Adams type jump, just because I think they were both hurt. I think they had the same thing. When you look at their, like, we're still talking about Pro Football Focus, but when you look at their quarterback ratings against when they were rookies, if they improve upon those in their third year, they're really good players. Now, it's going to be, if they improve upon their second year, they're just average. But I think they both still have the ability. I wouldn't mind seeing Rollins move to safety. I wouldn't mind seeing Morgan Burnett moved more permanently to inside linebacker. I just think that's the kind of league that we're in right now. I think you need to stop offenses like the Falcons and not worry so much about offenses like the Cowboys, because they're so unique. I would worry more about the spread attack and figuring out how to deal with that. So I think edge rusher for me is number one. We'll talk about that later. I think our consensus favorite guy probably at 29 would be TJ Watt of Wisconsin. I just think somebody there to team with the guy we're going to talk about here, I'm going to talk about in my top 3 guys to resign. I really like the way Denver did it when they were really good. I think a number 1 rushing team of, Matthews and Perry, and then a second rushing team of whether it's Fackrell and Watt or Watt and Jones or whoever, whatever, top rookie edge rusher guy, and Fackrell or Dayton Jones or J-Ron Elliott or whatever. I still don't understand why they don't use J-Ron in the pass rush role a little bit more. But I think if you can get to be a really good pass rush, it'll make the secondary better. I think that getting to the quarterback is potentially more important than covering, though they certainly have to cover better than they did a season ago. And then I'll echo what Jacob said about I would really worry more about a pass rusher, a pass catcher than a running back. As I said, I think Lacey Montgomery Crockett, Michael Montgomery Crockett, I don't care. Those 3 guys are good enough. You really like somebody in round 4, you really like somebody in round 5, grab them. If you feel like they're a tremendous value, that's fine. But as far as, focusing in those first 2 rounds, no thank you. This being the first podcast of the off season and looking out over the landscape of the whole thing, I asked you guys, and I'll go first, to pick 3 players to re-sign of all of the Packers free agents. If they do release Shields and release Starks, they should have about $47 million in cap room, which sounds like a lot, and it is. But there's a lot of guys who aren't under contract. So my 3, I really would like to see them re-sign J.C. Tretter, probably even ahead of T.J. Lang. I like Lang as a player. He's just older. And I think Tretter has positional flexibility that's really important, and I would just like to see him back with the team. The second guy is Micah Hyde. I really believe that his positional flexibility allows anyone in the secondary to get hurt, and he, I think, is able to at least provide reasonable starter quality at basically every position in the secondary, and that's so valuable because there aren't that many guys that can do that. And his interception against Dallas was a play that was made in the film room that I'll never forget. Plus, he's a really underrated punt returner. And then the final guy for me is Jared Cook. Anytime QB1 stumps for anyone, I think that should really be paid attention to. And I think Jared Cook should be a part of the program. I think he really is bought in. I think he can be probably re-signed at a very reasonable price because of how much fun he had this season. And so those would be my 3 guys, Tretter, Hyde, and Cook, with Nick Perry coming in at a very close 4th. Cody?
I would probably go Nick Perry, number 1. And of course, money is going to be a huge factor in all of these guys. And Perry very well could price himself right out of here, but Packers have been his home since he was drafted here. He's getting to know this defense better and better. He still has injury questions that other teams might not be so willing to throw a bunch of money at. So if he comes in at a reasonable asking price, I think Perry would probably be number one. With all of the outside linebackers that Green Bay has that are free agents, I think locking down at least one of them, and presumably the best one, of course, would be Perry. I think he'd have to be number one. Number two, I'm right there with you with Jared Cook. Everything you said, when Rodgers goes to bat for you, that says something. What he added to this offense to go on our run at the end of the year was just incredible. It was almost better than Jermichael Finley, I'd want to say. I loved having him on the field. It just created a different dynamic for our receivers, our running backs, our running game. Everything seemed to click much better when he was on the field. And three, it's either between Hyde and Shredder, and for the reasons you said, I think I'd lean towards Hyde. And I just like his position versatility, that if anybody were to go down, that that Hyde can step in there and know the defense, know where he has to be. And is he the stickiest guy in coverage? Not necessarily. Is he always going to make the play? Not always, but he's a serviceable player, and he should come in at a reasonable price. And he's a damn good fourth corner or third safety, or name it. He's a guy you want on your team. So my three would be Perry, Cook, Hyde.
Jacob?
Picking three guys, you guys have made so many good cases for some of these guys. And I'm trying to think, I'm going through my head, and I'm like, damn, I got to leave this guy out and this guy out. But I think I got to narrow it down. But number one, you guys keep bringing up J.C. Tretter, and I get the positional value, and I understand he's younger. But at the same time, the point I was making to myself today when thinking about it was they relied on J.C. Tretter to be a starter 2 of the last 3 seasons. And he has missed a significant amount of time in each of those seasons. He suffered a knee injury that basically made him not a starter in 2014. He gave way to Corey Linsley that year. This season he came in. Corey Linsley had a torn hamstring, and that gave J.C. Tretter the starting center role, and he lost that job eventually because he hurt his knee. So I would say T.J. Lang is my guy if I'm keeping an offensive lineman, and he's on my list. Like I said earlier, when you have a really good offensive line, I don't think you mess with that. You keep that together. So if you go into next year, I think you keep it. You've got Bakhtiari, you've got Lane Taylor, who proved better than serviceable this year. Corey Linsley in the middle. You've got Lang, and then you've got Balaga. I keep T.J. Lang number one. He's proven, I know he missed a little bit of time this year, but he's proven more durable than J.C. Tretter has. If you want positional versatility, Jason Spriggs has provided the same thing, in my opinion. The Packers also have guys like Kyle Murphy and such that they've proven behind. And I think that J.C. Tretter, you can also find a way to bring him back in because of limited exposure. But T.J. Lang is on my list. Jared Cook, for the same reason you guys have mentioned. I've talked about it for years. Ross, I used to use the word, and I think you kind of laughed about it, kind of made it a running joke, but dynamic tight ends. Guys that can move, guys that can run, guys that can stretch the seam. Jared Cook, there was a significant difference between watching him this year and watching Richard Rodgers as the starting tight end last year. And I don't mean to bag on Richard Rodgers, but Jared Cook is just a better player for what the Packers want to do with their offense. And anytime, like you guys mentioned, when Aaron Rodgers stumps for you, that has to mean something. And Jared Cook was a very good player. You can argue that he was the Packers' best receiver in the playoffs, especially considering that Jordy Nelson missed the Cowboys game. And he has an iconic catch in Packers playoff history, so that matters. And number 3, Ross, I apologize to you, and I am now officially apologizing to him on air, Micah Hyde. I have made a lot of jokes at his expense over the years, but like you've mentioned, is he Darrelle Revis on the outside? No. Is he as good as Casey Hayward was his rookie season in Green Bay in the slot? No. Is he Ha-Ha Clinton Dix as a safety? No. Is he, Devin Hester as a punt returner? No. But he's average to above and all those things. And like you mentioned, that interception that he made against the Cowboys, that's the thing that was made in the film room. And he does everything at least a little well. And like you said, he can do so many things for this defense. He's one of those guys that's just so valuable that he's not going to cost an arm and a leg. But if you lose that guy, that's one of those guys that you just realize, like, okay, if this guy goes down, we can just throw Micah there, and it's not the worst thing, but we're okay there. And then when he's gone, you're like, damn, we don't have that guy anymore. So, with all due respect to Nick Perry, I think he makes just a little bit less money than T.J. Lang. He definitely belongs on the list. I just think that Lang's a little bit more important to the offensive line, and he was the best pass rusher on the Packers, so I think he belongs back. He just missed my list by that much.
Fair enough. Let's actually dive into then the NFL draft and talk about on the first podcast the number one most important position in sports, quarterback. We actually threw quarterback out of ranking when we ranked the Packers' offensive needs, so that probably tips people off as to what we really think of that position as far as a need is concerned. So, guys, I'll ask you, what round, if any, are you looking for quarterbacks in? Jacob, go ahead.
None. I know that kind of makes for a weak first portion of the show, but, I mean, Aaron Rodgers is, as far as I'm concerned, the best quarterback in football. You can argue he's the most valuable player in all of sports. Brett Hundley, if Rodgers were to get hurt, I'm confident enough that he could win a game or two if that were necessary. And Mike McCarthy loves him some Joe Callahan. Eventually, he bounced around the entire league and ended up back with the Packers. So Joe Callahan's around. They'll bring in a fourth arm like they always do. So there's no sense to me in wasting draft capital on a fourth quarterback. So I think that's a guy you don't draft him. You sign him as an undrafted free agent. So I'm not looking to draft a quarterback in this year's draft. I know Ron Wolf said you draft one every year. And I agree with Ron Wolf as a Hall of Famer most of the time. This is just a time where I tend to disagree with him.
Yeah, that's completely fair. And I think just so people know, when we talk about draft, really this year, last year we focused a lot on the first 4 rounds because the Packers had 3 fourth-round picks. And if you're talking about the first 4 rounds, it meant their first 6 picks. At least in those first 4 rounds, you're generally talking about names that people know and guys that are likely to make the roster. This year, I think we're going to focus on the first 5 rounds because the Packers' compensatory pick is likely going to come at the end of round 5. They'll have 6 picks in the first 5 rounds. It's a little bit more of a stretch as far as your average football fan knowing everybody that they're talking about, but that's really what we're going to be focusing on this year. All my mock drafts are going to just be 5-round mock drafts. 6 and 7 is kind of a crapshoot, certainly. I would say definitely in those first 5, just leave quarterback alone unless you see something wild like they saw with Brett Hundley 2 years ago in the draft. I don't really foresee them needing to spend any draft capital on the quarterback position. Cody?
Just to reiterate everything, you can never say never if, draft value just smacks you in the face and you're staring at a guy who you thought would be a top 60 picks in the 4th round or whatever, you almost have to. But, I mean, just looking at the depth chart, you'd be hard-pressed to find, be able to put him on the practice squad without another team picking him up. So, to really look at drafting a quarterback doesn't make a lot of sense this season or in this draft. But, of course, looking at an arm and an undrafted free agent, of course, you're always trying to develop the next one. And, Joe Callahan was a perfect example of that. And, I know McCarthy's going to be excited to bring him in for a full offseason this year.
For sure. So, taking a look at guys you don't think will get drafted at this time, let's talk about our favorite quarterback prospects, guys that you think would have a chance to make some noise in camp, potentially overtake Mr. Jolton Joe Callahan for that 3rd spot. My guy, I really think that Brady Gustafson from Montana, I watched him play against North Dakota State twice in that opening game 2 years ago where he actually beat Carson Wentz and the Bison in Montana. Bison fans will never forget that. Brent Musburger called the game. Was just a really entertaining game, but he had some pretty good receivers, threw for a ton of yards against that defense, and is just I really think like a Mike Glennon without what you had to do to get Mike Glennon. He's 6'5". He's all of 6'5". Probably wouldn't beat me in a foot race, but at the same time has all the all the pocket quarterback physical abilities you would ever want, and operated a pretty pro-style offense out in Montana, at least that first year. I think that if I was to bring in a guy that I don't believe will get drafted, it would either be Brady Gustafson of Montana or Zach Terrell of Western Michigan. Cody?
That's actually, those are two really good names. I'll say two names as well. One, I really like Pat Mahomes from Texas Tech, and there's some talk about him going as early as the first round, all the way into the day 2, potentially early day 3. So his draft stack is really fluid. He's one of those guys I was saying just a minute ago that if you're there in the 5th round or 4th round and he's staring at you in the face, it might be worth a risk like that. The guy's just an eccentric playmaker, throws from multiple platforms, extends plays, Rodgers/Favre-esque, just an exciting player. So, if value with him, he's just kind of one of those guys where I think, he's a guy you want to have on your team. But as far as an undrafted free agent, if a guy is lingering around out there and you want to bring in an arm, I look to someone like Gunnar Kiel, someone who was from Cincinnati. He was highly touted coming out of high school. He just had an up-and-down collegiate career, was a backup at one point, but just invited to the East-West Shrine game, was a little up and down there as well, but he's got a live arm. He can make NFL-type throws. He's got decent size. He's just a good camp body, good arm that you kind of want to see how he does with a little bit of structure around him. And, no better place than Green Bay to come in and then kind of get your feet underneath you and learn a system and watch some of the best in the game above you play. So if value-wise, Mahomes is just a guy I particularly like a lot. And then an undrafted free agent, realistically, if Keel does go undrafted, I wouldn't mind bringing him in for a camp arm.
Why should we believe in Mahomes with the stigma that surrounds Texas Tech quarterbacks?
Well, I mean, you look when you're scouting players or prospects, you're scouting traits. Systems do obviously can sway people, or it can certainly be used as a negative. But you're looking at traits, and what you see with Mahomes is, yes, it's a run and gun, air raid system kind of thing. But can he make that 15-yard throw from the opposite hash? He can do that. Can he thread the needle on a slant? Yes, he can do that. Can he make the 9 route in between the corner and the safety and cover 2? He can do all those things. So you're really just scouting the traits. His numbers are ridiculous. 5,000 yards. I think it was 30 or 40 touchdowns, sure. But I'm not even concerned about those. I'm just looking at his arm and the throws that he can make, and honestly, his mobility, his pocket presence. I mean, there are some plays where you're just, jaw dropping. And again, I said Rodgers/Favre. I don't want to, build them up to be this mythical thing like those two legends, but he's made some throws in his collegiate career that make you go wow. So he has some playmaking ability about him that certainly unseat Callahan, but as far as unseating Hundley, I'm not sure he would be quite there. But at the same time, it's just a player that you'd really want to have in your camp and elevate your team around you.
I understand that. I guess I just wanted to get that opinion. I know a lot of people have the same question. Mahomes, I think, probably has to deal with a lot of the same stuff, like even almost that Derek Carr did because of David. I don't think it's fair to him, but that spread Texas Tech quarterback thing, it's a real deal because those QBs just have not succeeded in the pros. I think, I talked about my favorite guy in the undrafted area. My most underrated guy, I really like Swag Kelly from Ole Miss. I think he made Laquan Treadwell look good, which is something, that we now know he really did because Laquan Treadwell is not a very good player. I just think he's a little bit undervalued. Jacob, who's your favorite player? And then maybe talk about your more undervalued guy that probably won't be drafted or just an undervalued guy.
And just players I really like. My favorite guy is Deshaun Watson. I I watched this kid put on a show against NFL caliber defenses with Alabama in the national championship game the last 2 years. I've seen his draft status fluctuate as high as maybe number 1 to Cleveland, as low as maybe the 3rd or 4th round. So it really depends on who you ask, I guess. But the kid's fun to watch. I've enjoyed watching him at Clemson the last 2 years. And, Alabama's kind of that team where if you don't like them, you root against them. So I've rooted for Clemson really hard in the national title game the last 2 years. It was nice to see them win this year. But Watson was fun to watch without a clear-cut number 1 quarterback this year. I mean, admittedly, I haven't watched a ton of tape on the top-tier guys because the Packers simply aren't looking at a guy like that. But I think as of right now, if you ask me who my QB1 was, I'd probably tell you it was either between Deshaun Watson or Deshaun Kaiser. And right now, with limited tape, at least a little bit for Deshaun Watson. As far as the guy the Packers could actually take, I watched the guy at the Senior Bowl this week. His name is Josh Dobbs out of Tennessee. I've always wondered a little bit, and you've kind of seen a little bit with Brett Hundley, what Mike McCarthy could do with an athlete at quarterback. This guy's 6'4", he's 220. He's athletic, a little bit faster than what you would imagine a typical quarterback could run. He got a stronger arm, can do some things in the pocket, but he also makes some plays with his legs. Not the most accurate player, but Mike McCarthy's really good with footwork, plays in the pocket. The bag drill that they do in training camp is something that I really enjoy watching. Something I always notice is how good Aaron Rodgers' footwork is, and Mike McCarthy always talks about how that wasn't a thing when he first got in Green Bay. So that's something I enjoy watching. I think that's something he could fix with Dobbs as far as sloppy footwork and things of that nature. So Dobbs is a guy who I think the Packers could grab, get in their camp as an undrafted free agent. I don't think he's a guy who gets drafted. He didn't have a particularly strong showing at the Senior Bowl to just say, hey, I'm a draftable prospect. So that's a guy there at the end that they can grab, sign him. I think he could unseat Joe Callahan. To be honest with you, at least at minimum make the preseason entertaining, because reality is with your 3rd and 4th string quarterbacks, that's really all we're looking for, because we don't really want this guy to be playing when it's all said and done, because, in the regular season we want Aaron Rodgers to be the starting quarterback because he's Aaron Rodgers. And preseason, you're not going to see a ton of Aaron Rodgers. So the least you can do is hope this guy could throw a couple touchdown passes and make it fun to watch.
All right, Cody, why don't you give us your favorite QB in this class, and then I'll kind of get us wrapped up.
I think I touched on it already with Mahomes. Just the excitement, playmaking ability. Not quite the runner Johnny Manziel was, but the electricity that he brings to the type of offense. The wow throws, the plays that make you turn to your buddy and be like, "Did you just see that?" So Mahomes would be my guy for that. But you guys have touched on a lot of good names. And quarterback for the Packers is just obviously not something that they're going to be looking to address early. So my work on quarterbacks throughout the years have always been pretty limited, just because we have 12 under center, and we should be grateful for that.
Yeah, my favorite guy is Trubisky. That's a homer pick. Everybody knows I have an affinity for the University of North Carolina. He is right up there right now. CBS Sports has him as the number 1 quarterback. I think it's kind of a toss-up between he and Kaiser and Watson. But Mitch Trubisky, for me, is the number 1 guy. I think that he can operate in a number of different offenses. I think he showed that he was a good enough athlete. And there really isn't a throw on the field that he can't make. So for me, Trubisky's the guy, if I had to take one this year, that I would want. And we can all agree, there are a couple points we're going to hit with every position group. And the final one is, what is the likelihood that the Packers draft one in that first 5 rounds? It's almost none. We can all agree on that. With that thought, I think we'll close it up here. We really want to thank each and every one of you for checking this out. Cody, are you going to be back with either Packers Talk or Cheesehead TV as a draft analyst this season?
Yeah, I'll be back at Cheesehead TV this year. I got a mock draft that's going to be dropping soon. I was just reached out. Probably be doing the draft guide again this year. I don't know what position exactly yet, but yeah, I'll be doing a lot of the draft analyst stuff, popping off some scouting reports and that type of thing.
And Jacob, you're over at FanRag?
Yeah, it's called FanRag NFL. It used to be known as Today's Pigskin, and then actually at least to my knowledge, going to be helping out with the Cheesehead TV draft guide again this year. So excited about that too.
Right, yeah, keep an eye out for the draft guide. Jacob and I were contributors last year, plan on being contributors again this year. You can always check me out at Cheesehead TV and PackersTalk.com. I'm going on my little bitty, itsy-bitsy, feel sorry for myself end of the year vacation, though, right now. And, we'll continue that for just a little bit until I really dive into the off season. So that's where you can check out all of our work. Look forward to upcoming podcasts, moving forward. And we would like to thank you all once again for listening to this on the Packers Talk Network.